Spinal adjustments provided by Dr. Chad Rolfson. The Spinal Tuning Chiropractic Center is a Des Moines area low flat fee per month unlimited chiropractic care practice. When life happens, just adjust. Schedule today at spinaltuning.com. Welcome to Bible Storytime. Joseph as a ruler. Genesis 41, 1 through 57. After 2 years had passed, the king of Egypt dreamed that he was standing by the Nile River with 7 cows, fat and sleek, came up out of the river and began to feed on the grass. The 7 other cows came up. They were thin and bony. They came and stood by the other cows on the riverbank. And then the thin cows ate up the fat cows. Then the king woke up. He fell asleep again and had another dream. 7 heads of grain, full and ripe, were growing on one stalk. Then 7 other heads of grain sprouted, thin and scorched by the desert wind. And then the thin heads of grain swallowed the full ones. And the king woke up and realized that he had been dreaming. In the morning, he was worried. So he sent for all the magicians and wise men of Egypt. He told them his dreams, but no one could explain them to him. Then the wine steward said to the king, "I must confess today that I have done wrong. You were angry with the chef baker and me, and you put us in prison in the house of the captain of the guard. One night each of us had a dream, and the dreams had different meanings. A young Hebrew was there with us, a slave of the captain of the guard. We told him our dreams, and he interpreted them for us. Things turned out just as he said. You restored me to my position, but you executed the baker." The king sent for Joseph, and he was immediately brought from the prison. After he had shaved and changed his clothes, he came into the king's presence. The king said to him, "I have had a dream. No one can explain it. I have even been told that you can interpret dreams." Joseph answered, "I cannot, your majesty, but God will give me a favorable interpretation." The king said, "I dreamed that I was standing on the bank of the Nile when 7 cows, fat and sleek, came up out of the river and began feeding on the grass. Then 7 other cows came up which were thin and bony. They were the poorest cows I have ever seen anywhere in Egypt. The thin cows ate up the fat ones, but no one would have known it because they looked just as bad as before. Then I woke up. I also dreamed that I saw 7 heads of grain which were full and ripe, growing on one stalk. Then 7 heads of grain sprouted, thin and scorched by the desert wind, and the thin heads of grain swallowed the full ones. I told the dreams to the magicians, but none of them could explain them to me." Joseph said to the king, "The 2 dreams mean the same thing. God has told you that what he is going to do. The 7 fat cows are 7 years, and the 7 full heads of grain are also 7 years. They have the same meaning. The 7 thin cows, which come up later, and the 7 thin heads of grain scorched by the desert wind are 7 years of famine. It is just as I told you. God has shown you what he is going to do. There will be 7 years of grain plenty in all the land of Egypt. After that, there will be 7 years of famine, and all the good years will be forgotten because the famine will ruin the country. The time of plenty will be entirely forgotten because the famine which follows will be so terrible. The repetition of your dream means that the matter is fixed by God and that he will make it happen in the near future. Now, you should choose some man with wisdom and insight and put him in charge of the country. You must also appoint other officials and take 1/5 of the crops during the 7 years of plenty. Order them to collect all the food during the good years that are coming, and give them authority to store up the grain in the cities and guard it. The food will be reserve supply for the country during the 7 years of famine, which are going to come on Egypt. In this way, the people will not starve. The king and his officials approved a plan, and he said to them, "We will never find a better man than Joseph, a man who has God's Spirit in him." The king said to Joseph, "God has shown you all this, so it is obvious that you have greater wisdom and insight than anyone else. I will put you in charge of my country, and all of my people will obey your orders. Your authority will be second only to mine. I now appoint you governor over all Egypt." The king removed from his finger the ring engraved with the royal seal and put it on Joseph's finger. He put a fine linen robe on him and placed a gold chain around his neck. He gave him the second royal chariot to ride in, and his guard of honor was ahead of him and cried out, "Make way! Make way!" And Joseph was appointed governor over all Egypt. The king said to him, "I am the king. No one in Egypt shall so much as lift a hand or foot without your permission." He gave Joseph the Egyptian name Zaphath-Panah and gave him a wife, Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, the priest in the city of Helopius. Joseph was 30 years old when he began to serve the king of Egypt. He left the king's court and traveled all over the land. During the 7 years of plenty, the land produced abundant crops, all of which Joseph collected and stored in the cities. In each city he stored the food from the fields around it. There was so much grain that Joseph stopped measuring it, and it was like the sand of the sea. Before the years of famine came, Joseph had 2 sons by Asenath. He said, God has made me forget all my sufferings and all my father's family." So he named his first son Manasseh. And he also said, "God has given me children in the land of my trouble." So he named his second son Ephraim. The 7 years of plenty that the land of Egypt had enjoyed came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began, just as Joseph has said. There was famine in every other country, but there was food throughout Egypt. When the Egyptians began to be hungry, they cried out to the king for food, so he ordered them to go to Joseph and do what he told them. The famine grew worse and spread over the whole country. So Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold grain to the Egyptians. People came to Egypt from all over the world to buy grain from Joseph. But the famine was severe everywhere. Joseph as a ruler. Thank you for listening to Bible Storytime. You can subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, Spotify, iHeartRadio app. You can also share these stories with others if you enjoyed them. And you can follow along on my YouTube page at MyBuddyJimmy101. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, MyBuddyJimmy.